What happens when country music royalty walks into what should be a simple talk show interview, only to face disrespect that cuts deeper than any tabloid headline ever could? It only took 46 seconds of Tamron Hall's shocking comments for Reba McEntire to stand up, remove her microphone, and walk off the set in front of a stunned studio audience. This wasn't supposed to be controversial television. Reba McEntire, one of the most respected names in country music history, had agreed to sit down for what was promoted as a celebration of her decades-long career. The woman who had sold millions of albums, starred in her own sitcom, and built an empire through pure talent and determination was there to talk about her latest project. What she got instead was an ambush that would leave everyone watching absolutely speechless. The interview started innocently enough. Reba walked onto the stage wearing an elegant blazer and that signature warm smile that had made her America's sweetheart for over 40 years. The audience erupted in applause. These were her fans, her people, and they were thrilled to see her. Tamron Hall stood up from behind her desk, waving to the crowd with an energy that seemed just a little too forced, a little too performative. "Welcome, welcome," Tamron said as Reba took her seat. "Thank you so much for being here." "Thank you for having me," Reba replied, settling into the guest chair with the ease of someone who had done thousands of interviews before. The first few minutes went by without incident. They talked about the weather, about Reba's flight into town, about the energy of the city. Standard talk show banter. The audience laughed at the right moments. Everything seemed perfectly fine. But anyone paying close attention might have noticed something slightly off in Tamron's tone. There was an edge there, something sharp hiding beneath the smile. "So," Tamron said, leaning back in her chair with a casualness that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Let's talk about your career. You've been doing this for, what, 100 years now?" The audience gave an uncomfortable chuckle. Reba smiled politely, though something flickered across her face. "Well, I started young, but not quite that young," Reba said with grace, trying to keep things light. Tamron didn't let it go. "No, but seriously, you've been around forever. I mean, my mother used to listen to you. My grandmother used to listen to you. That's gotta be, what do they call it? A legacy act situation?" The word legacy hung in the air like a insult poorly disguised as a compliment. In the entertainment industry, calling someone a legacy act is a polite way of saying their best days are behind them, that they're riding on past glory rather than current relevance. Every artist knows this. Every artist hates it. Reba's smile tightened just slightly. "I prefer to think of it as longevity. I've been blessed to have fans across multiple generations." Sure, Tamron said, waving her hand dismissively. "But let's be real here. Country music has changed so much. I mean, you've got these young artists now doing things that are actually innovative, pushing boundaries, taking risks. Where do you fit into that?" The audience had gone quiet now. This wasn't the friendly interview they'd been expecting. This was something else entirely. Reba shifted in her seat, and for just a moment, you could see her processing what was happening, trying to figure out if this was really going where it seemed to be going. "I think there's room for everyone in country music," Reba said carefully. "The genre has always evolved, and I've tried to evolve with it while staying true to who I am." Tamron leaned forward, and there was something almost predatory in the movement. "But that's the thing, isn't it? Staying true to who you are, which is, let's face it, pretty dated at this point. I mean, when was the last time you had a hit? And I'm not talking about nostalgia tours or greatest hits albums. I'm talking about actual cultural impact." The audience gasped. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. You could insult a lot of things about an artist, but to question their relevance, their impact, their place in the industry they helped build, that was a direct attack. Reba's face had changed now. The polite smile was gone, replaced by something harder, something that showed the steel beneath the southern charm. "I think my record speaks for itself," she said, her voice steady but cold. 90 million albums sold worldwide, 40 #1 singles, 3 Grammys, multiple ACM and CMA awards, a successful television career, a Broadway run. "I've built my career on hard work and respecting my craft." "Oh, we all know about your awards," Tamron said with a laugh that sounded more like a dismissal than genuine amusement. "I'm not questioning your past. I'm questioning your present, your relevance now. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're kind of coasting, you know? Living off the name you built decades ago." "Coasting," Reba repeated, and there was ice in that single word. Yeah, coasting. I mean, look at Beyoncé. She just dropped a country album and completely revolutionized the genre. That's innovation. That's risk-taking. That's what we need more of, not more of the same old thing we've been hearing since the 80s. The comparison was deliberate and calculated. Tamron wasn't just insulting Reba's current work, she was positioning her as the old guard that needed to step aside for the new generation. She was suggesting that Reba's entire approach to music, the approach that had made her a legend, was obsolete. Reba was quiet for a moment, and you could see her choosing her words carefully. When she spoke, her voice was controlled, but everyone in that studio could hear the anger beneath it. Beyoncé is an incredible artist, and I have nothing but respect for what she does. But to suggest that what I do, what I've built my entire career on, is somehow less than because it's rooted in traditional country music, that's not just disrespectful to me. That's disrespectful to every artist who's poured their heart into this genre for the past 50 years. Tamron shrugged, like Reba's point was irrelevant. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Country music is changing, and some people change with it, and some people get left behind. I think we both know which category you fall into. The studio had gone absolutely silent. The crew members were exchanging glances. The audience members were frozen, unsure if they should react, unsure if this was somehow part of the show. But it wasn't. This was real tension, real disrespect, happening in real time. Left behind, Reba said quietly, and now there was something dangerous in her voice. You think I've been left behind? I mean, look at the facts. Tamron continued, seemingly oblivious to or uncaring about the line she'd crossed. When was the last time you were on mainstream radio? When was the last time you had a viral moment? When was the last time young people, and I mean actually young people, not just old fans reliving their youth, when was the last time they cared about what you were doing? Reba stared at Tamron for a long moment, and in that stare was 40 years of fighting to be taken seriously in a male-dominated industry, 40 years of proving herself over and over again, 40 years of earning every single bit of respect she'd gained. And here was someone who had been on television for a fraction of that time, questioning her worth, her relevance, her place in the industry she'd helped build. You know what's interesting? Reba said, her voice steady and clear. Is that you invited me here. You reached out to my team. You said you wanted to celebrate my career, talk about my journey, honor what I've accomplished. And instead, you've spent the last several minutes trying to tear me down, trying to make me feel small, trying to suggest that everything I've worked for doesn't matter anymore because I'm not 25 years old making TikTok videos. Tamron tried to interrupt, but Reba held up her hand. No, I'm talking now. You've had your say. Now it's my turn. I've spent 4 decades in this industry. 4 decades of early morning radio interviews and late night performances. 4 decades of being told I wasn't pretty enough, wasn't young enough, wasn't country enough, wasn't pop enough. 4 decades of proving people wrong, and I did it with dignity. I did it with respect for my craft and respect for the people who came before me. I never had to tear someone else down to build myself up. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. And you know what else? Reba continued. And now there was fire in her voice. You talk about relevance like it's just about chart positions and viral moments. But relevance isn't about how many TikTok followers you have. It's about connection. It's about meaning something to people. I have fans who've been with me for 40 years. 40 years. I have fans who walked down the aisle to my songs, who played my music in the delivery room when their babies were born, who held each other and cried to my voice when they lost someone they loved. That's relevance. That's impact. That matters. Tamron's face had changed now. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like panic. She'd expected Reba to shrink, to defend herself weakly, to maybe get a little emotional in a way that would make good television. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected Reba to stand her ground with such strength. I didn't mean to, Tamron started, but Reba cut her off. You didn't mean to what? Insult me? Disrespect me? Suggest that my life's work doesn't matter? Because that's exactly what you did, and you did it deliberately. You did it knowing exactly what you were saying and how it would land. I was just trying to have an honest conversation, Tamron said, her voice losing some of its earlier confidence. I was trying to talk about the reality of the industry. The reality of the industry, Reba repeated. The reality is that this industry has always been quick to discard women the moment they think we're past our prime. The reality is that men can have careers that span 50, 60 years, and nobody questions their relevance. But a woman hits a certain age, and suddenly everyone's asking when she's going to step aside. And I really thought, that we'd move past that. I thought we'd gotten to a place where we could celebrate women's longevity instead of using it against them. The camera caught several audience members nodding, some with tears in their eyes. But clearly, Reba continued, we haven't gotten there yet, because here you are, using your platform, your show, your voice, to do exactly what's been done to women in this industry for decades. You're trying to make me feel like I should apologize for still being here, for still making music, for still having something to say. Tamron opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She looked to her producers off camera, clearly hoping for some kind of intervention, some way to salvage this situation, but there was no saving this. She'd gone too far, and everyone knew it. I'm not going to apologize, Reba said, standing up now. The audience gasped. I'm not going to sit here and let you make me feel small. I've earned my place in this industry. I've earned the respect of my peers. I've earned the love of my fans, and I don't need validation from someone who thinks relevance is measured in Instagram likes. She reached up and removed her microphone, carefully unclipping it from her jacket. The action was deliberate, final. This wasn't a dramatic flourish. This was a woman making a choice, drawing a line, deciding that her dignity was worth more than any television appearance. Reba, wait, Tamron said, standing up as well now, her voice higher, more desperate. Let's just take a breath. We can talk about this. We just did talk about it, Reba said calmly, handing her microphone to a nearby crew member. And I think I've said everything I need to say. Thank you for your time. You can't just leave, Tamron said, and now there was something almost pleading in her voice. She knew what this looked like. She knew what this meant. A guest walking off her show wasn't just bad television. It was a statement. It was a guest saying that being on this show, being subjected to this treatment, wasn't worth it. I absolutely can leave, Reba said, and I am. Tamron tried one more time, her voice taking on a different tone, trying to sound reasonable, trying to regain control. Look, if I offended you, that wasn't my intention. I was just trying to ask tough questions. That's what journalists do. Reba turned back to face her, and the look she gave Tamron was withering. Tough questions are one thing. Disrespect, disguised as journalism, is something else entirely. And you know the difference. You absolutely know the difference. The audience came here to see an interview, Tamron said, gesturing to the crowd. You're disappointing them. It was a low blow, trying to use the audience against her, trying to make Reba feel guilty for standing up for herself. But Reba wasn't having it. The audience came here expecting a respectful conversation, Reba said, her voice carrying across the studio. I think I'm the one who's been disappointed. And judging by the faces I see out there, I'm not the only one. She was right. The audience members weren't looking at Tamron with sympathy. They were looking at her, with something closer to disappointment, even anger. These were people who had come to see their hero, and they'd watched her get ambushed instead. Tamron made one final attempt. So you're just going to run away? That's your solution? Walk off instead of having a real conversation? Reba smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm not running away from anything. I'm walking away from disrespect. There's a difference, and if you can't see that, then you've got bigger problems than a guest walking off your show. With that, she turned and walked toward the stage exit. Her head was held high, her shoulders back. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and why she was doing it. Behind her, Tamron stood frozen at her desk, clearly unsure what to do next. The cameras were still rolling, the audience was still silent, and Reba McEntire was walking away. As she reached the edge of the stage, a few audience members started to clap, then a few more. Within seconds, half the audience was on their feet, applauding. They were applauding Reba, not for her music or her career, but for her dignity, for her refusal to accept disrespect, for standing up for herself in a moment when it would have been easier to just sit there and take it. Reba didn't stop walking, but she did raise one hand in a small wave of acknowledgement to the audience. Even in this moment, even walking away from what had to be one of the most uncomfortable interviews of her career, she was gracious. She was professional. She was everything Tamron had suggested she wasn't. Relevance and class and dignity all wrapped up in one person. Tamron finally seemed to snap out of her frozen state. She looked at the cameras, at the applauding audience, at her producers, who were frantically gesturing from off stage. "We're going to take a quick break," she said, her voice shaky and uncertain. "We'll be right back." But Reba was already gone, the stage door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow felt louder than any dramatic slam could have been. She'd made her point, she'd drawn her line, and she'd done it in a way that left no doubt about who was in the wrong here. In the hallway backstage, Reba took a deep breath. Her hands were steady, her expression calm, but you could see the emotion underneath. This wasn't easy. Walking away never is, especially when you're walking away from something that's being filmed, something that will be analyzed and discussed and replayed over and over again. But some things are more important than good television. Some things are more important than playing nice. Self-respect is one of those things. A producer approached her cautiously. "Miss McEntire, I am so sorry. That wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't what we planned." Reba looked at her with kind eyes but a firm expression. Whether it was planned or not, it happened. And I wasn't going to sit there and be disrespected on national television. I've worked too hard and too long to accept that from anyone. "Is there anything we can do? Anything we can say?" "You can do better," Reba said simply. "You can book guests and actually respect them. You can ask tough questions without being cruel. You can challenge people without trying to diminish them. That's what you can do." Back in the studio, during the commercial break, chaos had erupted. Audience members were talking amongst themselves, some angry, some shocked, all of them processing what they'd just witnessed. Tamron was in a heated discussion with her producers. The crew was trying to figure out how to proceed with the rest of the show. Nobody knew quite what to do. Nobody had a playbook for this, because this wasn't a planned stunt. This wasn't manufactured drama designed to go viral. This was real. This was a guest who had been pushed too far, who had decided that her dignity was worth more than publicity, who had chosen to walk away rather than participate in her own diminishment. And that's something you can't script. That's something you can't fake. When the show came back from commercial, Tamron tried to salvage things. She addressed the camera with a practiced smile that didn't quite hide the tension in her voice. "Well, that was unexpected. Sometimes these conversations get heated, and that's okay. That's real television." But the audience wasn't buying it. You could see it in their faces, in the way they sat back in their seats with crossed arms, in the way they looked at Tamron with something closer to disappointment than enthusiasm. They'd come to see Reba McEntire. They'd come to celebrate a legend. Instead, they'd watch their host try to tear that legend down, and they'd watch that legend refuse to accept it. Tamron tried to move on to her next segment, tried to recapture the energy of the show, but something had fundamentally shifted. The trust was broken, the goodwill was gone, and everyone watching, both in the studio and at home, knew exactly what had happened and who was responsible for it. Meanwhile, Reba was in her dressing room, collecting her things with quiet efficiency. Her manager was on the phone, fielding calls from her team, from media outlets already catching wind of what had happened. But Reba was calm, centered. She'd made her choice, and she was at peace with it. "You okay?" her manager asked, covering the phone's mouthpiece. "I'm fine," Reba said, and she meant it. Better than fine, actually. I stood up for myself. That always feels good, even when it's hard. And that's the thing about dignity. It's not about never being challenged. It's not about everyone always treating you right. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone make you forget it. It's about recognizing disrespect and choosing not to accept it, even when accepting it would be easier. It's about walking away when staying would mean compromising who you are. Reba McEntire had spent 40 years building a career on talent, hard work, and integrity. She'd faced down bigger challenges than a talk show host with an agenda. She'd overcome obstacles that would have broken lesser artists. She'd earned her place in the pantheon of country music legends, not by accident or luck, but through sheer determination and undeniable talent. And on this day, in this moment, she'd proven something else too. She'd proven that success isn't just about the accolades you accumulate or the awards you win. It's about the character you show when things don't go according to plan. It's about the grace you maintain when someone tries to diminish you. It's about the strength it takes to stand up and walk away from disrespect, even when the cameras are rolling and the whole world is watching. The aftermath in the studio continued to unfold. Tamron struggled through the rest of her show, her usual confidence replaced by visible uncertainty. The energy was flat, the audience unresponsive. What should have been a routine day of television had turned into something else entirely, and everyone involved knew that this moment would define the episode, perhaps even define a turning point in the show itself. Because here's what Tamron had miscalculated. She'd assumed that Reba, with her southern charm and her reputation for being gracious and kind, would simply absorb the insults. She'd assumed that a woman who'd spent her career being professional would prioritize that professionalism over her own self-respect. She'd assumed wrong. Reba's walk-off wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a calculated decision made by a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and why. It was a statement that said some lines shouldn't be crossed, that some behavior shouldn't be tolerated, that respect is not optional just because someone has a microphone and a camera. In her dressing room, Reba looked at herself in the mirror one last time before leaving. The woman, looking back at her, was the same woman who'd walked onto that stage an hour earlier. Same strength, same grace, same unwavering sense of self. Tamron hadn't diminished her. The interview hadn't diminished her. If anything, she'd proven exactly why she'd remained relevant for 4 decades. Not because she was chasing trends or desperately clinging to fame, but because she was authentically, unapologetically herself. That kind of authenticity, that kind of integrity, never goes out of style. It's not about age or era or what's currently trending on social media. It's about being real, being honest, being true to yourself, even when it costs you something. And today, it had cost Reba an interview, but it had gained her something far more valuable. It had gained her an example, a moment that showed everyone watching what it looks like to stand up for yourself with grace and strength. As she gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the building, Reba could hear the muffled sounds of the show continuing in the studio. Tamron was trying to carry on, trying to pretend everything was normal, trying to fill the void that Reba's departure had created. But some voids can't be filled. Some moments can't be undone. Some decisions echo louder than any applause. The stage door opened one final time as Reba stepped out into the hallway, her assistant waiting with her coat and bag. The building felt different now, charged with the energy of what had just transpired. Crew members who passed her in the hallway looked at her with a mixture of admiration and sympathy. They'd seen what happened. They knew who was right and who was wrong. "Ready to go?" her assistant asked softly. "More than ready," Reba replied, slipping into her coat. As they walked toward the exit, Reba passed by the monitor, showing the live feed of the show. On screen, Tamron was interviewing her next guest, trying to muster enthusiasm, trying to recapture the show's momentum. But there was something hollow about it now, something forced. The elephant in the room, or rather the legend who'd walked out of the room, was too big to ignore. Reba didn't stop to watch. She didn't need to. She'd said what she needed to say. She'd drawn the line that needed to be drawn. Now it was time to move forward, to get back to what really mattered, which was her music, her fans, and the career she'd built on a foundation of talent and respect. The exit door opened to reveal a crisp afternoon, the sun hanging low in the sky. Reba stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the tension of the last hour begin to release from her shoulders. Her car was waiting at the curb, the driver standing ready to open the door. Before she got in, Reba turned back to look at the building one last time. Somewhere in there, the show was still going on. The cameras were still rolling. The audience was still sitting in their seats, probably still talking amongst themselves about what they'd witnessed. And Tamron was still behind her desk, trying to salvage a show that had fundamentally shifted the moment she'd decided that tearing down a legend was good television. But Reba wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She was simply certain that she'd made the right choice. Certain that her dignity was worth more than any interview. Certain that standing up for herself was more important than playing nice for the cameras. She slid into the car, the door closing softly behind her. As they pulled away from the curb, leaving the studio and the chaos and the uncomfortable interview behind, Reba felt something she hadn't expected to feel after such a confrontational experience. She felt powerful. She felt strong. She felt exactly like the woman who'd spent 40 years proving that talent, integrity, and self-respect never go out of style. Because that's the real story here. Not that a guest walked off a talk show, not that a host went too far with her questions, but that a woman who'd earned her place in history refused to let anyone make her feel like she didn't belong there. That a legend reminded everyone watching what it means to have dignity. That respect, real respect, is something you give and something you demand. And when you don't get it, you have every right to walk away. The car merged into traffic, carrying Reba away from the studio, away from the interview, away from the moment that would inevitably be replayed and analyzed and discussed for days to come. But wherever the conversation went from here, whatever think pieces were written or social media debates were sparked, one thing was absolutely clear. Reba McEntire had walked into that studio as a legend, and she'd walked out as something even more powerful. She'd walked out as a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to defend it. And in an industry that so often demands women shrink themselves, apologize for their success, and gracefully accept being pushed aside, that kind of strength, that kind of certainty, that kind of unwavering self-respect was more revolutionary than any number of chart-topping hits could ever be.